Welcome to Relax and Chat, episode 53. Today we have a teller of many tales, KP Maloy. Hi Keith, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Rod. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing really well. It's a good day so far. I like Saturdays. Uh, and I pull a lot of hours through the week. I've come to the point that my weekends are time off. And for me, this is fun. So this isn't work.
You have a lot of irons in the fire, that's for sure.
Oh, it's too many. I really hoped I would be able to hire a lot of help over the last year, but you'd be surprised, I guess, after the pandemic, uh, it's hard to find people that are willing to work at all. And then being a small press, it's hard to entice them with the big bucks that they think they're worth. And not everybody's worth as much as they think they are.
No, my day job is hospitality, and it's been tough to find since COVID. It's been tough to find people.
Yeah, it really is. The mentality change. The one good thing to come from it is home offices. You know, that helps the corporation really, and it helps the people because just the commute, my commute is a few steps. I like that. All right. Well, I guess I better hush and get on to the questions because I had some very, very cool questions, I think, because boy, you've written a bunch of books and some pretty fascinating ones. I looked at the Amazon descriptions and oh yeah, I want to jump into this. So
Okay.
to begin with, I'd like to hear about your trilogy, the Water Witches trilogy. If you
Okay.
mind, let us know a little bit about them.
Yeah. So that the Water Witches Loch Ness was my first book that I published. I guess I had a head start in that I wrote a bunch 20 years ago. So from 2000 till the end of 2003, I wrote like 11 books. That was pretty much my life. I worked. I went back and forth, but I didn't have much of a free time, much free life. And I did at that point meet someone, and I got engaged, and so I got married at the end of December 2003, and I wrote the last words of my last book from that first go around, right, like the week before our marriage. So I got married and changed jobs, and a bunch of stuff in my life changed, and so I kind of just got away from the writing for a while, and it kind of became in the background, and I knew I had those books sitting there, and I was like, okay, at some point I'm going to go back and you know release them or publish them. I would pull them out and read them every once in a while. But The Water Witches Loch Ness was one of the first books that I wrote back in 2000, 2001. I got the idea from, it came from the very first book I wrote was about a tainted fountain of youth. And there's a Latin passage in there where they say, the water witches, blah, blah, blah. And the guy he's telling the story to mishears it. And he thinks he says water witches. He's like, water witches? He's like, that's not what I said. And so when I got done with that book and I was thinking of like what my next story was going to be, I kept thinking about the water witches and I wasn't sure how to incorporate that. And I saw a documentary about Loch Ness, and there was a gentleman talking. He had a big long beard, and he was a biologist, and he was just disputing it and saying, "Oh, it's not real, it's not real." And it just got me thinking about the whole Loch Ness, motif and what they were trying to accomplish with the monster. And I kind of got the impression that they wanted to scare people away, but what it did is actually brought more people there. And
Mhm.
so, what people don't know is that the Loch Ness monster it's been seen throughout history, but it really first came into prominence when they were building a road to help Londoners get up to, help the city folk get up to the Northern Highlands. And my impression was the local people weren't real fond of that. And so I kind of thought to myself, I don't think the witches would be fond of it either. I think they have sacred places. They don't want people there. And I think they came up with this idea of the monster, and it backfired on them. And really, if you look at a lot of my stories, the theme of people, and in this case, witches, creating their own monsters, is something that I see reoccurring over and over again. And I think that happens in life where we do create a lot of our own worst problems sometimes.
Mhm.
And so it's been a motif in a lot of my writing. The trilogy is the first book, which is basically one person's attempt to clear their name from the events that happen in this book. So if you read the blurb, it's about three writers. It talks about three writers coming to Loch Ness after the death of this developer. And what you realize when you read the first chapter, the prologue, sorry, is that it says, when I came to Loch Ness, I didn't expect to write this story or become a part of the folklore. I just planned to send some postcards. And so the prologue tells you right there that one of these three writers is not the person telling the story, because these three writers came to write a story. And the person in the prologue wasn't doing that. And so that's kind of a little hint, a little mystery. And you do find out that the fiance of one of the writers is the one who writes the story, and it's sort of attempted to clear her name. The sequel, Rihanna's Legacy, Rihanna is one of the witches, and that came about from in the course of editing this book, endlessly. I started to kind of like, I don't want to say dislike, but I started to despise the characters a little bit, and so I was like, I need the witches to have their tale. You know, the witches have to tell their side of the story and why they did what they did, and so that became this book, and it was a lot of fun to write because it was the witches' perspective. I kind of got to cut on the first characters in this book a little bit, and that was, you know, fun and unique. And so it was a great project. This was the first, well, I guess to say this is the second book I wrote in the go around, which is ironic because this is the second book I wrote the first time around. So it's kind of cool that they're both the second books in my evolution of writing. And then the third book, which ties it all together, is The Water Witch's Loch Ness Legacy. So I take the two titles, Loch Ness and Rihanna's Legacy, and combine them to get Loch Ness Legacy. And the third book in this one is it's a lot more fun. It's pretty fast paced. It's a little darker, and it's just about two people coming together to try to figure out this mystery that's in these first two books, and it doesn't end well for them. So you will notice that the trilogy is much larger than the first two books, and that's because this book actually has all three books in it. So if you get this book, you don't really have to get the first two books. I paid a company, one of those hybrid companies. I was kind of dumb, and I paid them some money to help me publish these two, and it was a good experience, but it definitely showed me that they didn't do any editing, and that was a big part of it. I thought, hey, I get an editor, I get someone to help me format, and that didn't really happen. And so I do all that stuff myself now, and I put it all in the book, so you don't have to buy these other two. And it's it's interesting because it gets a little darker as it goes. Each book gets a little darker than the previous one.
I think it sounds really great. I really like that in the second book you switch to the witch's perspective. I'm a horror writer, and yeah, I like witches. I think they're cool. And there's so many different things you can do with the witch's personality, magical powers, lore. There's so many things you can play with in that makes the story very fun and exciting to read. One thing you said, I won't dwell on it, but one thing you said really, I find this very frustrating on social media. Any publishing house, I own a publishing house, and I worked for a pretty prominent publishing house before I started mine. Any publishing house worth 2 cents that wants to publish your book, your story, should provide high-level quality editing, absolutely free, and really help you make your story the very best that it can be. Any publishing house that falls short of that, no writer should go to them because they shouldn't exist if they're not going to do the job right. And I was kind of sad to hear that you had to deal with, someone just not doing their job. And sadly, it's a lot more common than people realize, especially new writers. They have no idea,
It's amazing. I mean, you hear a lot about it on Twitter and social media is how, all the people coming after writers and trying to, manipulate them or get them to spend money on their products or whatever. And it's, to me, the writing community is vulnerable in that way because we spend a lot of time, we put a lot of passion into this, we care about it. There's a lot of emotion involved. And so I think a lot of times we are making decisions maybe with one side of our brain, as opposed to the other side that's really kind of thinking through everything. Oh, yeah. And so we are a vulnerable group, and we have high hopes and aspirations, and we want to believe in ourselves. And, so, yeah, I mean, it makes sense that, I'm glad that someone else, and I'm glad someone else recognizes that I'm doing a good job and I'm trying, and this person gets it, but they're not really getting it. They're just saying what they need to say to get you to fork over the money or whatever.
Oh, yeah, it's a shame. Sadly, you've got two sort of enemies in the world of editing, three now. You've got the outright crooks that are going. I mean, I've had authors tell me that they spent a bundle of money to an editor that didn't edit the book or did it with a crayon while he was drunk, and it's horrible. Then you've got
sat on it past the deadline.
Yeah. And then you've got the editors who mean well, they really want to do a good job, And the only way they fail is that they don't tell you up front that they have no experience and no idea what they're doing, and that's waste time and money, and this day nobody can afford to waste either, you know.
No.
And nowadays, I won't harp, but it's worth mentioning the third evil one in the editing world is freaking AI, and really just about any of the programs that have been around since long before AI. Uh, you can't rely on those.
No.
The major, writing tools that are very popular, I tried all of them. And I discovered that if you put the same information in all three, every one of them will give you something different. And as a new
Yeah.
writer, you're like, which way do I go? This is a very reputable company, but so is this one, but they're telling me completely different things. They're
Yeah.
not very helpful and they don't answer questions. They're just programs. So those three things make it terribly hard for a new writer, especially, to get good quality, solid editing. And then so many indie authors, it breaks my heart. They skip editing entirely, or they try to, everybody should self-edit to a point, but editing is a specialized craft. And you're right. A writer is a creative. Well, fiction writer at least is a creative. Even nonfiction, you need a little bit of creativity,
Yeah.
you know. But an editor is like an accountant. And an editor is a calculating, thinking, non-emotional, non-creative to a point. You've got to have a little bit of creativity, especially in developmental editing. The editor needs that, but they are two completely different jobs. As you said, your third book is kind of an omnibus of all three stories. And I'm like, okay, the audience is going to buy your third book. Your other two are going to sit. And
No,
so
that's kind of honestly that's kind of the plan. I mean, I want to turn the first two off and just sell the third one. Because the first two are kind of, I mean, these are covers that I didn't design I didn't have, my two artists I'm using now design, and and I like the covers all right, but it's just I want to just kind of it be one book,
yeah,
and help clarify my library a little bit and kind of push it in that direction.
well, that makes sense. That really does. I question everything because I'm learning all the time. I'll be the first person in line to say I don't know everything. I've been learning as I go since the day I started. This next book I want to ask you about caught my eye. It'll be the first one to hit my TBR just because I love the premise and the little short description on Amazon. So I'd love to hear more about it. So I was hoping you would tell us a bit about Horror on the Edge of Town.
Yeah, so a couple things about this book. Originally, it was called House on the Edge of Town, and it was a horror story. Nothing about the story changed, but Amazon didn't like that title because there had been other stories that had similar things, and so I was like, so I went back and forth with them, and then I just changed it to Horror on the Edge of Town, and I realized it's actually a much better title. So Amazon did me a favor by not letting me publish it originally, even though I was frustrated. Sometimes life forces it that way. Like you got to just get over yourself and take what you're getting. But so yeah, Horror on the Edge of Town. There was a house in my hometown that was just on the outskirts of town, and as high school kids we used to go there and you know drink beer or whatever we weren't supposed to do, and we'd hang out there. And I remember a bunch of us wrote our names on the walls, and nothing nefarious really happened to us. But in in this story, that is not the case. And for everyone who writes their name on the wall, that ends up their future does not end too well. And so a couple people end up putting this truth together, and one convinces the other they got to do something about it. So this book was unique for me in that it's a first person point of view. I don't do a lot of those. Most of mine are third person. And so I did two books in a row that were both first person, and it was exhilarating. It's a whole, when you're not used to writing that way, it's almost like I don't, I don't really do drugs, but it made me think of like some kind of drug that you just shoot right into your vein, because it's just like you're in it and you're right there and you're like everything is coming through your perspective, and it's a very powerful way to write. Editing becomes a little tougher because it's again a whole different way of thinking, I guess. um but no, it's a cool story. It's very dark. It does not have a happy ending, and it was a lot of fun to write.
Oh, yeah, I bet it was. And it's funny because I enjoy reading and writing first person as well as third. Now, the stories that have come across my desk in my career so far, I will say first person has a unique challenge because so many writers who have sent me first-person stories, the real challenge is tense, present or past tense. Just about every manuscript I've received, the writer accidentally jumps between past tense and present tense all through a first person story. And that really doesn't happen much in
Yeah.
third person, but it's very
No.
in first. So that's something you got to keep in mind if you're going to write first person, because it does throw the reader off,
Yeah.
you know? And
It does, and it gets you. I mean, because you're used to doing one way, and then really, like I said, when I was editing, that was the hardest part was the tense. You know, just
oh yeah.
keeping it consistent. And I'd be going, and I'd realize, wait, I just edited that whole part. Like, you know, I had to go back, and it's like, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah. Well, this is a fantastic episode because it is what I envisioned when I created this show 53 episodes ago. Two fellas chatting, having a conversation. I'm loving this. However, we do need to take that little break before my program shuts us
Okay,
down. We'll come back in a few minutes and we'll pick up where we left off. Is that all right?
I'll get some more coffee. Yeah, thank you, sir.
Yeah, yeah, I didn't top off my coffee too. All right, see you soon.
Okay.
Okay, my show being what it is, we had to take a little break. I'm very happy to be back to the audience. We're speaking with KP Maloy, a very fascinating author with some great books to talk about. So we're going to jump back into it and tell y'all a little more about some stuff going on. So the next book that caught my attention, which really many of them did, but my show's so limited in time. But this one was cool. I just like the concept right off the bat. We don't believe in you. Oh, tell us about that little tale.
Yeah. So that book was kind of written. I was a little upset when I wrote it. There was a back and forth on Twitter from someone who was talking about ghosts, and they wanted to, their conclusion was that for scientific reasons and because they're a mathematician and a biologist, that ghosts do not exist, and if you disagree, sit down. And so I'm all for people having their own opinion, and I realize ghosts may or may not exist. I mean, I believe they do because of some experiences I've had, and I don't care if people don't believe in them. I mean, that's you know, we have our rights to believe in things like that if we want to or not. What really bothered me though was the sit down part. You know, like I'm not gonna I'm not gonna like belittle someone for the beliefs they have. I'm not gonna, you know, poo poo them. And it really bothered me that that person did that. And so I went to bed that night and I just kept thinking about it and I was angry and I told my wife like I couldn't sleep and you know she's like, well, I'm having no trouble sleeping, so just why don't you on write about it? And so I kind of did, and I did the setting in this church. It was a place I used to work. It was an old church that became a brewery, and there were some, you know, we parted ways amicably, but we were definitely going in different directions. And so the "We don't believe in you" is kind of a little bit pointed at them, but also it's pointed at the main title character who does not believe in ghosts at all. Um, they're very open about saying they don't believe in ghosts. They're trying to reopen this church and make it a brew pub. They don't like the idea that people are talking about their, you know, being haunted and being ghosts and having a past. And she really wants to put some distance between that. And as you read the story, you kind of find that there are some personal connections and there's a reason for that.
Mm. Well, I've got to say, I don't think I've ever said it publicly on social media or a video. I'm going to say it now. I personally, I think because I'm just some guy in Kentucky and I've got a limited reach in the world, although I've got writer friends all over the world. Social media has been good for that. Anyway, I'm going to say this because it's the absolute truth. I believe everything is possible. I think Bigfoot, aliens, Loch Ness, a government that actually cares about its people, uh, all of these fictional things. Who am I to say they don't exist? You know, the universe, the galaxy is so huge. Surely there's some other life somewhere else. You know, Bigfoot, we've got a lot of forest land in the United States. He could definitely avoid us. You know, there's a lot of people I would avoid if I could. Yeah. So I never say anything absolutely does not exist. Who the hell am I and how do I know that?
Yeah.
I like to believe everything is possible. I'm a writer. I'm a creative. I don't want to be limited by saying something doesn't exist. Your story about witches. Well, heck yeah. I mean, there actually are, what are they called? Wiccans?
Wiccans, yeah,
A form of witches that are well accepted as real people, you
yeah.
know? And why couldn't there be witches, magic powers and things like that? I think they'd find a better mode of transportation than a broom. But but I loved Bewitched. If you're old enough, that was a great
Yeah,
little series back
yeah,
in the day. Elizabeth Montgomery was her name, I think, and she was absolutely
yeah,
charming and actually a very pretty girl next door type of girl. She was
yeah.
cool.
That was a
And
great
anyway,
movie.
I just said it. I put it out there. I believe in everything. Everything's possible. And I think it is a shame, like you said, when anybody said, "Oh, that don't exist." How the hell do you know? Just because you haven't seen it
Right.
doesn't mean it ain't there. And I absolutely agree with you that any rude ass bastard that tells someone to sit down, I just want to, ooh, I don't have time for arrogant assholes. That's
Yeah.
something that will send me into unfriendly mode quickly. And, when I was young, that was very bad. But now that I'm older, I just 3, 2, 1, you don't exist, go to hell.
You're right. I mean, yeah, it's kind of the same way. I mean, when I was younger, I used to let that stuff really bother me, and like now, it's just like write about it, get it off your shoulder, and move on. It is what it
Yeah,
is. Because
yeah,
we can't give people too much control over our life. A lot of people already have control in our lives, and the more you cede to other people, the less you have yourself. And so
yeah.
it's like just what
And
you can believe what you want to believe, and you can tell me whatever. But
yeah,
I was in the
I
moment, I
love,
was mad.
I love Twitter X. My favorite thing about it is that it reminds me of the old AOL chat room. And on Twitter, I've had so many excellent conversations with writers in the DM box where we can just sit and chat with each other. And I don't know any other place where you can really do that. Instagram's cool. You can post a picture, put a little bit about it. That's nice. And I think you can chat on Instagram a little bit, but Twitter is just ideal for that. And I've met so
Twitter's
many,
perfect for that.
yeah, I've met so many wonderful writers. But sadly, Twitter, like most all of them, is plagued with negative people that are mad at their life. And instead of fixing their life, they're going to try to make somebody else's life miserable. Go find
Yeah.
something else. Go find something else to do.
I always give them the picture of the one person sitting there with like, a bank of cell phones and they're in front of the screen. And they're always like, this is who you're arguing with, and so it's, yeah, just walk away from those people and don't give them the power
Yeah.
or,
Now I
or
need to
write a,
move
or write a
on.
book about them.
I need to move on both for time, but also because I found this absolutely fascinating. As I've said before, I am a writer. I'm currently working on a novel, but this blows me away because I see more and more indie writers doing this. You sit down, whether you're a pantser or a plotter, and you start typing your first paragraph or your first page. You already have it in your head that this is going to be a series. That impresses me and blows me away because I'm like, I just want to write this novel. I want to get this story really good. I don't even think about a possible trilogy until later. And when I finish the first draft or sometime doing editing, because as an editor, I've got enough sense to hire an editor. You do need those extra eyes. And I saw that you are working on, I believe it's a work in progress, a pentology. Already, I don't know how far you are into writing it, but 5 books. I love the title. I don't know if I'll pronounce this right. Laconia, Queen of
Lyconia is how
the,
it, yeah.
Queen of the Wolfen. The premise that again, Amazon's a little limited on their descriptions, but it was enough there that it really grabbed my attention, made me want to see what this is about. So, of course, I want to ask you where you are in the project, and if you would, tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah. So, I didn't start it as being a series. I started just to write the first book. I wanted to write a werewolf book. Um, I like to write. I write books that are like one of three styles. One, kind of my own stories, like whatever it is, like how horror on the edge of town. I have stories I write that are based in a fictional town in Ohio, and that's kind of a series of books. And then I have some books that I write that are like vampires and witches and werewolves and more of your classical like universal monsters. And so
Uh,
I want to have a book that kind of covers all that stuff. And so I was in a period where I just finished actually Horror on the Edge of Town. I wasn't sure what I was going to write next, and I thought I'm never going to have another idea for a book, even though I had a bunch of ideas. And I was driving through Desolate, Ohio, and I just had this idea for the werewolf book, and so I started writing it, and it was super cool. And it's about a very powerful lycanthrope who's century, like she's 2,400 years old, so she's very very old, at the height of her power, and she gets beheaded. The first chapter, she gets beheaded. She kills someone who kills her whole pack, and then that whole book is her life flashing before her eyes. So the whole story goes backwards. Kind of, it's almost a little bit like Interview with the Vampire with werewolves, but it starts at the end and just kind of goes backwards. And what you see is that this person she kills, the last person she kills before she gets killed, is an assassin who killed the last five of her pack. And you find out that she's actually the one responsible. And as you go through backwards, you see that she's responsible for really doing that a few times in her life with people that should have trusted her and her followers. And so it kind of takes you back to the beginning and kind of shows you where she started and why she is the way she is. And at that point, it was going to be the end of the book, and that was the end of the book and the end of the whatever. But then I started thinking about it, and there was one little character the one who decapitated her, and in my mind, that's the second book, and she is a newbie werewolf. She's an accidental, she got attacked as part of this, trying to kill the person who, as the lycanthrope trying to kill the assassin. She was caught in the crossfire, and so the second book is her as the complete opposite. She's a brand new werewolf. She has no idea what's going on. She's at the weakest she's ever been as far as like personally, because she's been exposed for being a con woman and whatnot. So she's kind of on the run, and all this bad stuff is happening to her, and she doesn't know why. And by the end of the book, she does put together that she's a werewolf, and so she's kind of stuck with that, and it that book is kind of dark also. And then book 3, 4, and 5. Book 3 is her after a year, and she's kind of figured it out. Like when it's that time of the month, theoretically, to be a werewolf, she goes out in nature and gets away from society because she doesn't want to just kill innocent people. And not that that's a perfect plan, but it's what she does to limit it. Book 4 is Lyconia, the first werewolf, the lycanthrope. They're about to cremate her body, and they put the head back on the body, and it's a full moon, and she comes bursting out of the crematorium. And that whole, like, most of that book is just her trying to get back home. She doesn't know what's going on. She no longer has the ability to control her, her lycanthropic powers. And she's kind of, been reduced to being just a common werewolf. She has no control over it. She doesn't know what happened. Where is this all gone? She's lost a year of her life that she doesn't, realize. She thinks it's the wrong month. And so she finally gets home, and book 4 ends with her and this other werewolf kind of coming together as humans, and they interact. And then book 5 is, are they going to get together, or are they going to, be able to live together? Or are they going to clash? Once the time comes for them to both be werewolves. And so book 5 is that ultimate kind of meeting. So all the books are written. I've been working on editing and revising them for the last 2 years. The plan was initially to release them last year, but I knew book 1, I really liked how books 2, 3, 4, and 5 go. And so I wanted to make book 1 as good as possible to draw people in and give them a reason to want to read the other ones. So I just spent a lot of time just really meticulously focusing on editing them, getting some feedback from other people. So I'm at the process now where May is when they're going to be released. I plan to release the first book on May 1st, which is a full moon. I plan to release the second book on May 15th, which is the new moon. And the attack actually happens during the new moon, so that kind of works out. And then books 3, 4, and 5 are going to be released at the end of the month, May 31st, which is a blue moon. 2 full moons in 1 month. So it's kind of, special, and I'm kind of playing on that a little bit. But I want them to be released in short order to give people a reason to kind of read them. To me, if I just had, this one book idea and this one story, I would try to draw it out longer and make it take more time. But I have other books I'm ready to get to, and I've been working on werewolf. I've had a pack mentality for the last couple of years. And so I got other stuff on other projects I'm ready to move on to. So May is going to be the release for all 5 of these books, and I'm super excited to see how it's received.
Well, it sounds very intriguing. I mean, any one of the books you described by itself sounds like a great storyline.
Thank
I'm
you.
guessing you're a very skilled plotter. To have all that in your head like that, I'm 100% pantser. I literally, while writing a paragraph, I don't know what's in the next paragraph. I mean, I'm that much of a pantser.
I usually have like a beginning and an end. I have an end in sight most of the time when I start writing, and I am very much a pantser, to be honest with you. But
Hmm.
I do at some points. I mean, you do got to kind of think about it, and so at some points the pantser thing, you kind of I want to sit down and figure out where I'm going. There are times though when I just sit down and just goes, and I know where I want to go, and how I get there kind of happens, and it's all fine and good. With this one, it was a little different. I wasn't sure how I wanted book five to go necessarily, and I wasn't sure how book four was going to end. And so I did know though how I wanted book five to begin, and so I actually wrote book five before I finished book four, and I wasn't sure how to get them to that point, and so I just started book five, and they were already at that point, and I wrote that, and I saw the dynamic that they had, and so that helped me go back then and bridge those two pieces. So
Oh.
if that makes sense.
Sadly, my show is what it is. We're going to run out of time, so I need to move on. I want to give
Okay.
you this opportunity. If we don't get to it, I usually ask for social media stuff. I will definitely put that kind of stuff down in the description, you
Okay.
know. So, and I always share my show across my entire platform, pretty much all the major platforms. But I really think, especially in our conversation, I think this is very worthwhile to give you the opportunity to address the audience directly and share anything you like.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. First, I want to thank you. I do appreciate the time you take for me and for other artists, other indie artists especially. Like we do appreciate that. I do have some books here of mine that I'd like to show. Mistaken Mummy is my mummy book, and it's set in South America. So I want to do something unique. I didn't want to do an Egyptian mummy. So South America has some great history, and they have some great mummies and some incredible just the architecture and the lost history that we have in the Americas. It is amazing, and it gets lost a lot of times because Egypt is so fascinating and there's so many treasures in the desert. But North and South America have some, and Central America have some amazing stuff too. And so this is a cool story. It's a very short, easy to read. It does not end well. This is Mind Over Gray Matter. This is one of the older books I wrote. This book actually means a lot to me because it was lost. Like the 11 books I wrote 20 years ago, I had a physical copy of each one. I had it on my computer, my pre Y2K computer. And for some reason, I did not have a copy of this one. I gave it to somebody at one point in my life. I never got it back. And so, my computer, I couldn't access the information on it anymore. And so I thought this book was lost. It's pretty decent sized. I found a diskette, like one of those little, what, 3x3s or whatever it is. And I found an actual wizard who was able to get the information off. And so that's what this book is. I'm super happy to have it. And then the last book I released before the werewolf book is this one. It's The Devil's in the Details. And this is about computer hackers and the devil. It's set in 2003. There are a couple chapters that are in a chat room, like you're talking about, like an old AOL chat room, and so it's a little different setup. It looks a little different than a normal book. Um, at the suggestion of Jan Michalowski, who you know and have talked to on here before, he said you got the text is too clean in the chat room. You got to make it a little messier. Like they don't conjugate all the verbs and everything or whatever. And so I went back and I made it more of like, like you would like slang and whatnot. And that was such a pain when it came to editing because everything popped up. It was like, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. It's like, no, I don't care. I know it's wrong. I know it's wrong. And so I'm a little worried that that's going to maybe turn some people off. But it's only like 4 chapters out of 39, and it's a cool book. I like this one a lot. It is again one of my legacy books, one of the older ones. So that's the third one of those I've released, and so number four will be next year.
Oh, I want to comment very quickly that all of your stories, all of your books have very cool covers. But I've got to
Thank
say,
you. Yeah,
that Gray Matter book, if you would hold that up again,
yeah.
that is a killer cover. That is so cool.
So this is Ruth Anna Evans. I don't know if you guys know her. She used to be on Twitter a lot. She's on Facebook now. I love her. She's an awesome person. She lives, I believe, in Indiana. She lives right down the river from us. So she's a local as far as me goes. But half my covers have been Ruth Anna Evans. I appreciate her so much. At Fantasy Arts is a different website. They have done a lot of my other covers. They did this one, for instance. I like her too, Katrina. They're both, they're humans. They both do great work. They don't use AI for the covers I've used. I don't know what they do, in their personal life with practicing with AI or whatever. But that is something that's important to me, is to use a human editor. My my graphic skills are pretty extremely limited, so I need help with that regard. And I've been lucky to find them, and they've been great.
Yeah, like I said, I think all the covers really look good. I mean,
Thank
I,
you.
I was very impressed with that looking on Amazon. I'll have a link to all of your books.
Thank you
And
very
the
much.
first thing that anyone will do when they go there is say, wow, these are some really great covers, and they are. Uh, I don't think the book is Queen of the Wolfen's not yet released, but there is a picture of the cover and it's awesome. I mean, that's something I'm really impressed with, especially that you use human artists. That's fantastic,
And all five
Again,
books in the Wolfen series are going to have that. They do have the same cover artist.
cool. I apologize for my show having limited time. Some of these hosts can do it for hours. My show is what it is. I run a publishing house. I've got to watch my expenses, and this program is free. But if you like your primary contact information, your website or social media, so that people can reach out and say hi, would you share that real quickly?
Yeah, so I'm still working on a website. That's one area where I'm pretty, I guess, not professional yet. I haven't really. I have a website I paid for. I started to develop it, and they wanted their website process uses AI to develop the website, and so I kind of got hesitant about that. So I've just been sitting on that website for a while, and that is a project. Once I get this werewolf thing done this year, I do want to up my presence as far as the website goes and how I deliver books to people. Right now, I'm just on social media as KP Maloy, or KP Maloy author KP Maloy. Sorry. So I'm pretty active on Twitter, and I guess I'm on Discord, but that's a lot to keep track of. And I'm on Facebook and Instagram. So I am behind the I guess 8 ball as far as that being caught up to a website type professionalism. But that is coming. So
Yeah.
I
Well,
appreciate you offering.
in a soon conversation on Twitter, I'll recommend a couple websites if you like website
Yeah,
builders.
yeah,
Uh,
I
I've got,
would.
I think I have 5 websites now. So I have a little bit of knowledge in that area. And like you might have caught on, I really do look for affordable, usable, quality, again, affordable websites, just like I do with everything. Uh, Too many writers don't pay attention to their budgets. You know, if you spend $5,000 on your book and you sell it for $12 and you make 3 or 4, how many books do you have to sell? You know, and
Yeah,
for some reason, well, they're creatives. They don't think about that. You know, I was an accountant for a lot of years, so I pay attention to a lot of little things like that. But anyway, though, I can recommend a couple websites that are reasonably priced and very easy to use.
yeah, I would appreciate that. Feel free to send me a DM for sure.
Okay. Let's see. I think we actually covered everything. I love that you gave such great detail on each of the books we talked about, and you added some of your others. I said at the beginning of the show, the teller of many tales. You've been at this for a while. You've written a lot of stories. Sounds like you have a lot of stories yet to write. You know,
I
that's
do. Yeah.
that's fantastic. It really is. And I can't thank you enough for coming on my little show. I've so much enjoyed our conversation. A real
I
pleasure to speak with
I
you.
have as well, Rod. Thank you so much.
To the audience, this is episode 53 of Relax and Chat. Our wonderful guest, Keith Maloy, and all these great stories. I'm going to have a link down in the description on YouTube. You can click it, go to see every book he's written, or a lot of them anyway, and just you could throw a dart and hit one, and I'm sure you're going to get a book you love. I got it. I don't know, 5 books now headed for my TBR. uh, Very, very cool, really. I hope you've enjoyed episode 53 of Relax and Chat, and I hope you have a great day. please come back to see the next one. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you so much.